They thought I'd never notice. My husband growing distant, my best friend suddenly everywhere, dinners at our house, texts checking in, concern that felt just a little too intense. I told myself I was lucky to have such caring people in my life. Then I found panties that weren't mine hidden in my own bedroom, and everything I thought I knew shattered in an instant. But instead of falling apart, I started paying attention. Really paying attention. And what I discovered wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated attempt to take over my entire existence. This is the story of how one pair of panties opened my eyes, and how I went from trusting wife to someone who wouldn't let betrayal go unpunished. If you've ever trusted the wrong people, if you've ever had that moment where everything suddenly makes horrible sense, hit that like button and subscribe. This story is about waking up from denial and taking back everything they tried to steal. I found them on a Saturday morning in late September while organizing our bedroom closet. I was doing one of those thorough seasonal cleanings, pulling everything out to donate clothes I hadn't worn in a year, reorganizing shoes, creating space for winter items. The kind of deep cleaning you do when you're trying to feel productive, trying to create order in at least one area of your life. The panties were tucked inside a shoebox at the back of the closet, a box that was supposed to contain my winter boots. Black silk with delicate lace edges, expensive looking. The kind of lingerie you buy for special occasions or to feel beautiful in a secret way. They were a size small. I wore medium. They had a designer label I'd never purchased from, and they definitely, absolutely were not mine. I sat on the bedroom floor holding them, my brain struggling to construct an explanation that made sense. Could they have been mixed into our laundry somehow? Could they belong to my sister who'd stayed with us last month? Could there be any innocent reason for another woman's intimate apparel to be hidden in a shoebox in my closet? No. The answer was no, and I knew it immediately, even as I tried to find alternative explanations. These panties were hidden deliberately. They'd been placed where I might not find them for months, tucked away with seasonal items I only accessed when weather changed. Someone had worn them here, in my house, possibly in my bedroom, and then concealed them hoping I'd never discover them. My husband Michael was downstairs making breakfast. I could hear him moving around the kitchen, the sounds of normalcy and weekend routine floating up the stairs. Saturday morning breakfast was his tradition. Elaborate omelets or pancakes, good coffee, the newspaper spread across the table. One of those small rituals that made our marriage feel stable and comfortable. I should have gone downstairs right then. Should have walked into the kitchen holding those panties and demanded an explanation. That's what any rational person would do when confronted with obvious evidence of infidelity. But something made me pause, made me sit there on the closet floor thinking instead of reacting. Because if I confronted Michael now, what would happen? He'd deny it, probably. Or admit it but minimize it. A mistake. A one-time thing. Meaningless sex that meant nothing. He'd apologize, maybe cry. Definitely promise it would never happen again. And then what? Would I believe him? Would we go to counseling? Would I spend the rest of our marriage wondering if he was lying, checking his phone, searching for evidence of the next affair? Or maybe he'd confirm what a small voice in my head was already whispering, that this wasn't random, wasn't some stranger or coworker. Maybe he'd tell me something worse, something I wasn't ready to hear without more information. I put the panties back in the shoebox and continued cleaning the closet, finished organizing everything, carried donation bags downstairs, joined Michael for breakfast like nothing had changed. We ate omelets and discussed our plans for the day, whether we should go to the farmer's market, what movie we might see that evening. Normal conversation, normal Saturday, except everything had changed, and only I knew it. Over breakfast, I watched Michael differently, looking for signs I'd missed, clues I'd dismissed, evidence of deception I'd been too trusting to notice. He looked the same as always, tall and lean, dark hair starting to show gray at the temples, the kind smile that had first attracted me 8 years ago when we'd met at a mutual friend's party. But was there guilt in his eyes? Nervousness in his manner? Any indication that he was hiding something massive? If there was, I couldn't see it. Michael seemed completely relaxed, completely normal, exactly like a husband who had nothing to hide and no reason to feel uncomfortable. Which meant either he was innocent and the panties had some other explanation, or he was a much better liar than I'd ever imagined. After breakfast, while Michael was in the shower, I went through his phone. I'd never done it before in 8 years of marriage. Never felt the need, never questioned his fidelity, never doubted that what he told me was true. But I needed to know if those panties meant what I thought they meant. Needed evidence before I confronted him with accusations I couldn't take back. His phone was password protected, but I knew the code, our anniversary. He'd never hidden it from me, never acted like his phone contained secrets I shouldn't see. I scrolled through his texts first, looking for anything suspicious, any conversations that seemed intimate or secretive or wrong. Nothing obvious. Messages to coworkers about projects. Texts to his brother about football. A thread with his mom discussing when we'd visit for Thanksgiving. Everything normal, everything expected. But then I noticed something odd. His message thread with my best friend Jenna only went back 2 weeks. Just casual exchanges. Her asking if we wanted to come over for dinner. Him responding about scheduling. Nothing inappropriate in content. But why did the thread only go back 2 weeks? Jenna and I had been best friends for 12 years, since college. She texted both of us regularly, was part of our daily life, our social circle, our routine. Her message history with Michael should go back months, maybe years, not just 2 weeks. Unless he'd been deleting their conversations. Unless there was something in those older messages he didn't want me to see. I checked his email next, scanning through recent messages for anything that raised flags. His inbox was organized, professional, mostly work-related, but there was a folder labeled personal that I'd never noticed before, tucked among folders for utilities and subscriptions. I opened it. Hotel reservation confirmations. 3 of them over the past 4 months, all at the same boutique hotel downtown, all booked for weekday afternoons. Reservations Michael had never mentioned. Stays I knew nothing about. The dates stood out. Afternoons when Michael had told me he was working late, meetings that ran long, client dinners that required him to stay in the city. 3 afternoons over 4 months. 3 times he'd lied about where he was and what he was doing. 3 times he'd been at a hotel instead of work. My hands were shaking as I closed his email and put his phone back exactly where I'd found it. I felt sick, felt the world tilting sideways, felt everything I thought I knew dissolving into something unrecognizable. Michael was having an affair. The evidence was clear, undeniable, sitting right there in his phone he'd never expected me to search. But with who? The panties and the hotel reservations proved infidelity, but they didn't tell me who he was sleeping with. Could be a coworker, someone I'd never met, a stranger whose identity wouldn't hurt beyond the basic betrayal. Or it could be someone I knew, someone whose involvement would make everything so much worse. I thought about that message thread with Jenna, deliberately deleted beyond 2 weeks. Thought about how present she'd been lately, how often she'd been at our house, how caring and concerned she'd seemed about our lives. We'd been friends for so long that her constant presence felt natural, felt like the kind of closeness best friends have. But what if it wasn't just friendship? What if those deleted messages contained evidence of something else entirely? Jenna was at our house for dinner that Tuesday evening, something that happened regularly, but that now felt sinister in light of what I'd discovered. She arrived with wine and stories about her terrible day at work, settled into our living room like it was her second home, laughed and joked through dinner with an ease that made my stomach turn. I watched her interact with Michael, looking for signs, searching for evidence of intimacy beyond friendship. Were they too comfortable with each other? Did their glances linger too long? Was there body language that suggested more than what they were showing? Nothing obvious. They acted like they always acted, friendly, familiar, the easy rapport of people who'd known each other for years through me. Michael poured wine. Jenna helped clear dishes. They teased each other about sports teams and movie preferences. The same kind of banter I'd witnessed countless times before without ever questioning it. But I was questioning everything now. Every smile felt calculated. Every casual touch seemed loaded with meaning I'd been missing. Every inside joke made me wonder what else they shared that I didn't know about. "You okay?" Jenna asked at one point, when Michael was in the kitchen getting dessert. "You seem quiet tonight." "Just tired," I lied, forcing a smile. "Long week at work." "You work too hard." She squeezed my hand, her expression full of concern that looked so genuine I almost believed it. "You need to take better care of yourself." Make Michael help out more around the house, take some of the pressure off. The advice sounded caring, supportive, exactly what a best friend should say. But all I could think about was those deleted messages, those hotel reservations, those black silk panties hidden in my closet. All I could wonder was whether Jenna's concern was real or performed, whether her friendship was genuine or part of some larger deception I was only beginning to understand. After Jenna left that night, I started investigating in earnest. I went through old credit card statements looking for unusual charges, patterns of spending that didn't match what I knew about Michael's schedule. I found lunches at expensive restaurants on days he'd told me he was eating at his desk. I found purchases from a boutique that sold women's lingerie, purchases made 3 months ago, right before our anniversary, that I'd assumed were gifts for me but that I'd never actually received. I checked the dates of those lingerie purchases against my calendar and realized Michael had bought them the same week as his first hotel reservation. He'd bought expensive lingerie and then checked into a hotel, and none of it had involved me. Someone else had received those gifts, worn them for my husband, benefited from his generosity using money from our joint account. I felt rage then, cold and focused, burning beneath the surface of my careful composure. Michael wasn't just having an affair. He was spending our money on it, using resources that should have been going toward our mortgage, our savings, our shared future. He was funding his betrayal with finances I'd helped build, treating marital assets like his personal account for financing infidelity. I needed to know who. I needed concrete proof, not just suspicions and deleted messages and circumstantial evidence. I needed to see them together, needed confirmation that would erase all doubt and justify what I was increasingly certain I'd have to do. So I started following Michael. Not every day. I had my own job, my own responsibilities, couldn't spend all my time playing detective. But on the days when he claimed to be working late, when his calendar showed meetings that seemed suspicious, when his behavior suggested he was lying about his whereabouts, I made excuses to leave work early and tracked where he actually went. The third time I followed him, I got my answer. Michael left his office at 4:30 on a Thursday, earlier than he'd claimed he'd be done with work. He drove not to a hotel, but to a residential neighborhood I recognized, the area where Jenna lived. He parked 2 blocks from her apartment building, walked the rest of the way, let himself in using a key he shouldn't have had. I sat in my car watching that building, feeling something inside me break and reform into something harder, colder, more certain. My husband and my best friend. The 2 people I'd trusted most, the 2 people who should have been the safest relationships in my life, were betraying me together. Michael emerged 2 hours later, looking relaxed and satisfied in ways that made me want to vomit. He drove back to his office, stayed there another hour, then came home right on time for the late dinner hour he'd promised me, acting like he'd been working all along. "How was your day?" I asked when he walked in, my voice steady despite the rage simmering beneath. "Exhausting. Back-to-back meetings, difficult clients, you know how it is." He kissed my cheek, the same casual affection he always showed, not a hint of guilt in his expression. "I can imagine," I said, and let him shower while I finished making dinner, acting normal, giving nothing away. I could have confronted him then, could have exploded with accusations, demanded the truth, forced him to admit what I already knew, but I didn't. Because I'd realized something important in the hours I'd spent documenting his betrayal. Confronting them now would give them control of the narrative. They'd minimize it, call it a mistake, maybe even turn it around and blame me for not being attentive enough, loving enough, present enough in the marriage. No. If I was going to do this, I needed more evidence. I needed to understand the full scope of their betrayal, how long it had been happening, how deep it went, what they'd said about me when they were together. I needed them to condemn themselves so thoroughly that there'd be no room for excuses or lies or manipulation. I hired a private investigator, expensive but necessary, a professional who could document what I couldn't safely observe myself, who could gather evidence that would stand up in divorce court, who could build a case that left no room for doubt. The investigator's report, delivered 3 weeks later, was devastating in its thoroughness. Photos of Michael and Jenna together at restaurants, at her apartment, at hotels. Timestamps showing a pattern going back 8 months, Almost as long as Michael and I had been discussing starting a family, making plans for our future, talking about the life we'd build together. 8 months. While I'd been dreaming about having children with Michael, he'd been sleeping with my best friend. While I'd been trusting Jenna with my hopes and fears and vulnerabilities, she'd been systematically betraying every confidence, every moment of friendship we'd shared. But the report included something more damaging than just photos of them together. The investigator had recorded conversations, audio from public spaces where they'd met, where expectation of privacy didn't apply legally, where their words could be captured and used as evidence. I listened to those recordings once, then never again. The pain was too sharp, too immediate, too overwhelming to revisit, but I kept them because they showed something crucial. Jenna didn't just want my husband, she wanted my life. "She's so boring," Jenna's voice said on one recording, captured at a restaurant where they'd met for lunch. "All she talks about is work and house projects. She has no idea how to actually live, how to be spontaneous or exciting." "She's reliable, though," Michael had responded. "Stable. That's important, too. Stable is just another word for predictable. I could give you so much more than what you have at home. We could travel, have adventures, actually enjoy life instead of just going through motions." "I know, but it's complicated. The divorce would be messy, expensive. Her family likes me. All our friends would take sides. So let them. We deserve to be happy. You deserve someone who actually appreciates you, who makes you feel alive, not just comfortable." They'd continued in that vein for over an hour, discussing their relationship, their future, their assessment of me as a person and a wife. Every word was a knife, every criticism a betrayal beyond just the physical affair. They didn't just want to hide their relationship, they wanted to replace me entirely, to build a life together that erased my existence except as an obstacle to overcome. The recordings revealed something else, too. Jenna had been deliberately working her way deeper into our lives. The constant presence at our house, the caring concern, the supportive friendship, it was all calculated. She'd been studying my marriage, learning what I didn't give Michael, finding ways to position herself as the better alternative. "She mentioned they might try for a baby soon," Jenna said in another recording. "Can you imagine? That would tie you to her forever. You need to make a decision before that happens." "I know. I'm working on it. Just need to figure out the finances, make sure I'm protected." They were planning. Not just continuing an affair, but actively strategizing how to end my marriage, how to minimize Michael's financial losses, how to transition from betrayal to legitimate relationship. I was an obstacle to be managed, a problem to be solved, not a person whose feelings or future mattered at all. I felt cold rage listening to those recordings. Not the hot anger of immediate betrayal, but something deeper, more focused, more determined. They'd misjudged me completely, assumed I was boring and predictable and too stable to fight back. They thought I'd never find out, or that if I did, I'd simply accept it and move on without making things difficult for them. They were wrong. I consulted with a divorce attorney who specialized in complex cases involving infidelity. I showed her the evidence I'd gathered, the photos, the recordings, the credit card statements showing Michael spending marital assets on his affair. She was impressed with how thorough I'd been, said most clients came in with suspicions, but that I had concrete proof that would hold up in court. "With this evidence, we can argue for dissipation of marital assets," she explained. "He used your shared money to fund an affair. That money should be compensated from his separate assets in the division." "What about her?" I asked. "Can Jenna be held responsible too?" "Alienation of affection isn't recognized in this state, unfortunately. But her involvement will certainly impact how the court views your husband's credibility. And if you're concerned about protecting your reputation, this evidence shows clearly who was at fault." I spent the next week preparing. I opened a new bank account and transferred half our savings. My legal share, the attorney confirmed. I secured all the documentation I'd need: marriage certificate, financial records, the investigator's report, copies of the recordings. I moved my important personal belongings to my sister's house, things I didn't want to fight over later or risk losing in the division. And I planned one final gathering, one last dinner party where all the truth would come out at once, where Michael and Jenna would be exposed in front of the people whose opinions they cared about, where their reputations would suffer the way mine would have suffered if I'd been the one caught betraying. I invited 8 people to dinner on a Saturday evening. Michael's brother and sister-in-law, my sister and her husband, and 2 couple friends who were close to both Jenna and us. People who deserved to know the truth, who'd be hurt by the deception, who'd need to choose sides once everything was revealed. Jenna came too, of course. I'd invited her personally, told her I was feeling disconnected lately and wanted to reconnect with close friends. She'd accepted immediately, probably relieved that I wasn't suspicious, probably thinking she'd successfully maintained her cover. Dinner was elaborate. I'd spent all day cooking, creating the kind of impressive meal that showed effort and care. We ate and drank and talked, the conversation flowing easily, everyone relaxed and comfortable. Michael and Jenna were careful not to interact too much, maintaining appropriate distance, playing their roles perfectly. Dessert was served. Wine glasses were refilled. Everyone was in that pleasant, slightly tipsy state where defenses are down and honesty comes easier. That's when I made my announcement. "I need to tell you all something," I said, setting down my wine glass with a hand that didn't shake despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "I've discovered that Michael has been having an affair, for 8 months, with Jenna." Silence. Complete shocked silence as everyone processed what I'd said, looked between Michael and Jenna, waited for one of them to deny it. Neither did. Michael went pale, his expression frozen. Jenna's face flushed red, then white, her mouth opening but no words coming out. "I have evidence," I continued calmly. "Photos of them together at hotels, recordings of their conversations planning their future together, credit card statements showing Michael spending our money on gifts for her. Everything documented, verified, undeniable." "Sarah?" Michael started, but I held up my hand. "I don't want to hear excuses. I'm not interested in apologies or explanations. I'm just making sure everyone here knows the truth before I file for divorce on Monday. Before you all hear a different version from them. Before they try to control the narrative or make me look like the bad guy." Michael's brother looked devastated. "Mike, tell me this isn't true. It's complicated." "It's not complicated," I interrupted. "He cheated. She betrayed our friendship. They spent 8 months lying to everyone while planning their future together. That's the simple, uncomplicated truth." My sister was staring at Jenna with undisguised disgust. "How could you? After everything Sarah's done for you, how could you betray her like this?" Jenna finally found her voice. "You don't understand. You don't know what their marriage was really like." "I know exactly what my marriage was like," I said coldly. "I know because I was in it, living it, believing it was real while you were undermining it. What I didn't know was that my best friend was secretly trying to steal my life." I stood up. This dinner party clearly over. "I wanted you all to know the truth from me first. So when they tell their version, when they try to minimize what they did or justify their choices, you'll remember this moment. You'll remember that they lied to all of us for months, that they're capable of deception on a scale that affects everyone in this room." I looked at Michael and Jenna, meeting their eyes directly. "You thought I was boring and predictable? You thought I'd never figure it out or never fight back? You were wrong about me. Just like you're wrong if you think this betrayal won't follow you everywhere." I left them all sitting there in stunned silence, left my own house, the home I'd built with Michael, because staying would mean continuing a conversation I had no interest in having. I drove to my sister's house where I'd been secretly moving my things all week, where I could finally let myself feel the full weight of what I'd discovered and what I'd lost. The divorce took 6 months. Michael tried to fight initially, wanted to negotiate reconciliation, thought he could convince me to forgive him, but I had evidence that made his infidelity undeniable, recordings that showed he'd been planning to leave anyway. His attorney eventually convinced him to settle rather than go to trial where all the evidence would become public record. I got the house, the better car, and a favorable division of assets that compensated me for his wasteful spending on the affair. Michael got to keep his retirement account and take full responsibility for the credit card debt he'd accumulated funding hotel rooms and gifts for Jenna. Jenna lost more than just our friendship. Our mutual friends chose sides decisively, cutting her out of social circles she'd been part of for years. Her reputation in our community was destroyed. Word spread quickly about what she'd done, how she'd betrayed her best friend, what kind of person she'd revealed herself to be. She ended up moving to a different city, unable to face the judgment that followed her everywhere locally. Michael and Jenna tried to make a real relationship work after the divorce. It lasted 4 months. Apparently, relationships built on betrayal and deception don't transition well into legitimate partnerships. They brought out the worst in each other: paranoia, jealousy, guilt that couldn't be overcome. They destroyed my marriage but couldn't build anything lasting from the wreckage. A year after my divorce was finalized, I was okay. Not healed completely, betrayal that deep leaves permanent scars, but functional, moving forward, building a new life that didn't include either of them. I'd learned valuable lessons about trust and vigilance, about red flags and intuition, about the importance of verifying what you believe versus just believing what you're told. I learned that people who seem safe can be the most dangerous, that familiarity breeds opportunity for deception, that sometimes the person trying to steal your life is the one offering the most sympathy and support. I learned to trust my instincts. That first moment of finding those panties, my gut had known the truth even as my brain tried to find innocent explanations. I learned to listen to that voice, to investigate rather than dismiss, to document rather than confront. Most importantly, I learned that I was stronger than I'd thought, strong enough to face devastating truth without falling apart, strong enough to plan strategically instead of reacting emotionally, strong enough to ensure consequences for people who'd betrayed me so thoroughly. The panties were just the beginning. One piece of physical evidence that led to discoveries I'd never imagined. Revelations that shattered everything I thought I knew about my marriage and my closest friendship. But they were also the catalyst for taking back control, for refusing to be the naive, trusting woman they'd assumed I was. I found out because of panties hidden in my closet. But what I really discovered was my own strength, my capacity to face truth without flinching, my determination to ensure that betrayal came with real consequences. They wanted my life. Instead, they lost their own reputations, their relationship, and any claim to being decent people. I lost a husband and a best friend who'd never deserved either title. In the end, I won. Not because I got revenge, though I did, but because I refused to let their betrayal define me as a victim. I took control, gathered evidence, exposed truth, and walked away with my dignity intact. That's the real victory. Not what I took from them, but what I refused to let them take from me. If this story resonates, if you've faced betrayal and wondered how to respond, subscribe and share. Because you're stronger than you think. And people who underestimate you always learn that lesson too late. Claude é uma IA e pode cometer erros. Por favor, verifique as respostas.